The idea of an armored train, which is like a moving fort on train tracks, wasn't brand new when World War One started. There were earlier ones used in wars like in American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War, but these machines were much more important during World War One. An armored train was covered in strong armor carrying artillery, machine guns, and other weapons. It was made to use the extensive train network in time of war. Armored trains became common in World War One because how the war was fought. The fighting areas, especially the Eastern Front, were huge, and the roads were often bad or not even there at all. Trains, on the other hand, were a good way to move soldiers, weapons, and supplies quickly. So, armored trains were a way to bring a lot of firepower and protected soldiers along these important train lines. They did many jobs, like checking out enemy positions, helping soldiers in fights with supportive fire, moving people and goods through dangerous areas, and keeping train lines safe. These trains were built and utilized because the war was so extensive that every form of transportation was used and converted to support the war machine. At this point, cars were still pretty new, but they already been used extensively, and tanks were just starting to appear. So, converting the main way of travel into a weaponized system was a smart idea to show and project power. Even though they looked powerful and had a lot of firepower, armored trains weren't always super effective. They were strong and could bring big guns to certain places along the train track very fast, but their biggest strength was also their biggest weakness because they had to stay on train tracks. They could only fight in certain places, and the enemy knew that where they might be. This made them easy to stop if someone blew up the bridge or a tunnel or maybe the trucks themselves. In an event of a damaged railway, an armored train easily gets stuck and be helpless. Also, let's not forget that they were big and loud, so they were very easy target for enemy artillery and late in the war for airplanes. These problems that they were stuck to the trucks showed that armies needed a fighting vehicle that can deliver a punch and could move more freely over different kind of grounds, and this fueled the development of the tank. When the war started in 1914, the army of Austria-Hungary didn't have any armored trains, even though these machines had been useful in other wars. The leaders of the Austro-Hungarian army might have been a bit old-fashioned and didn't see how useful they could be at first. But once the fighting began, especially on the vast Eastern Front against Russia, they quickly showed that they needed this kind of mobile firepower. The first push for Austro-Hungarian armored trains didn't come from the top of generals, but from officers that were fighting on the front line of the war. In September 1914, Captain Fritz Schober, who was in charge of the 15th Railway Company in Galicia, built a simple armored train. He did this by putting 8 to 12 mm thick metal plates, also known as boiler plates, on a locomotive and adding rails and thin iron plates onto open cars with machine guns sticking out of small holes. Around the same time, Captain Koshowitz of the 5th Railway Company put together another simple train on the Munkacs-Istria line. This one had two fighting parts with field guns. This somewhat homemade train fought in September and October 1914 and did surprisingly well. Because these homemade trains worked so well, the Army High Command decided to act. They officially ordered design and to build armored trains. The job went to the Hungarian State Iron, Steel and Machine Works, the MÁVAK factory in Budapest. The first of these standard trains, called Panzerzüge 1, was sent to Máramarossziget on 5th of December 1914 and went into battle right away. More trains were made and used throughout 1915. In the end, the Austro-Hungarian army had at least 12 regular armored trains which was used during the wars. Most of them were made of standard armored cars, but how they were put together could change. They were building them on a somewhat modular designs, as they designed them based on the needs on the battlefield and not from plans made from before the war. The standard Austro-Hungarian armored train, or Panzerzüge, was usually built with armored locomotives and two main kinds of fighting cars. The infantry wagon, which was an infantry car, and the cannon wagon, which was a cannon or artillery car. The main locomotive used for these trains was often an armored version of MÁVAK Type 377 steam locomotive. Armor like the 8 to 12 mm boiler plates used on the first homemade trains, and these were added to protect the engine and to protect the crew. These armored locomotives were usually only used in actual fights. sides. For long trips, to save the armored engine from wear and tear and to go faster, a much stronger unarmored regular train locomotive usually pulled the whole armored train to the destination. The Kanonwagen was the train's main gun platform. It usually had a main turret with a 7 cm gun, which was often made by Skoda, and a smaller turret for Schwarzschild machine gun. On top of this, 2 or sometimes more Schwarzschild machine guns in slanted holes on the sides were also installed. Many Kanonwagens also had an armored lookout dome on the top for the commander to see and direct gunfire. Some earlier versions might have used a 7 cm, but I think looking at the pictures, it's more likely the 66mm SFK L30 Navy gun. Later these were replaced or joined by Austro-Hungarian 8 cm M8 8L30 field guns. What on earth is that? The infantry wagon, also called as an assault wagon or Sturmwagen, was made to carry soldiers and give fire support up close. These cars usually had 5 M07 Schwarzschild machine guns in 4 big slanted holes on the sides, plus many small holes for rifles that had armored covers. The infantry wagon often had 2 levels inside. The ground floor for the machine guns and a very low upper floor for riflemen. Like the Kanonwagen, many infantry cars also had an armored lookout dome on the roof so they could see what was going on around the train. The armor on the Austro-Hungarian Panzerzüge wasn't always special armor plate. Cars were often protected by 12mm thick regular steel plates. This was often made stronger on the inside with a 40mm layer of oak wood and another inside layer of 9mm steel. This sandwich type of layered armor gave a very good protection from small bullets and shrapnel. The main weapons were the 7cm Skoda cannons or 8cm field guns in the Kanonwagen. The most common machine gun was the Schwarzschild M07/12. This was a strong water-cooled belt-fed gun that used the 8x50mm R Mannlicher bullets, which was the standard machine gun of the KUK army. How Austro-Hungarian armored trains were put together wasn't always the same. It could be changed based on what was needed. Heavy trains, sometimes called Type V, were the most powerful ones. A typical heavy train might have 5 parts. An infantry wagon in the middle, an armored locomotive on each side of it, so 2 locomotives in total, and a Kanonwagen at each end of the train. Light trains were more common and usually had one Maverick Type 377 armored locomotive with 2 infantry wagon on either side. Other setups also existed. For example, Panzerzüge 4 was described as a light train with added Kanonwagen at the front. Most trains usually had 1 artillery car and 1 or 2 infantry cars, or sometimes just 2 infantry cars. The exact makeup of a train could also be changed while it was being used. This ability to change things allowed them to be flexible in how they were used for different missions. The Austro-Hungarian Panzerzüge were used in different ways in battle and fought on several important fronts of World War I. Their main jobs often included scouting and get information about enemy positions and movements, giving mobile fire support to soldiers who were attacking or defending and fighting enemy forces directly when they had a chance. They are also used safely move soldiers and important supplies throughout areas that might be dangerous. A special job for the Austro-Hungarian armored trains was to cover retreats. Their firepower could stop enemy soldiers from chasing, allowing friendly soldiers to get away more safely. They were like moving artillery batteries and platforms for close support of soldiers. How they were designed and used shows that the army understood their strength in bringing protected firepower to specific places on the train line, but also knew that they were in danger if they went too far or got caught on damaged tracks. Austro-Hungarian armored trains fought on several fronts. This was a big area for Panzerzüge operations, especially in places like Galicia. The Kanonwagen with their big guns in turrets were very common on the Russian front. This was partly because the train lines there often didn't have many tunnels like in mountain areas. Understandably, tunnels and armored trains in a combat scenario were not really friends of each other. The fighting on the Eastern Front was more back and forth compared to the fixed trenches of the Western Front. This made the trains useful as mobile attack forces. They could be sent quickly to make raids or to help defend parts of the line that were in trouble. Austro-Hungary used many armored trains against Italy. Some reports say that up to 11 of them at some point turn up on this front. Here, in the difficult mountain land of the Alps and along the Ischons River, their main job were to give artillery support to soldiers in difficult positions and, very importantly, to cover retreats during the hard battles. Being able to quickly move big guns along the few train lines in such a land was a huge help. Austro-Hungarian Panzerzüge also fought in the Romanian campaign. A special Austro-Hungarian armored train vehicle, the Motorkanonenwagen, was destroyed on this front. This was a self-moving armored railcar, a quicker ID than bigger trains, and it had a turret with 70mm Skoda gun and Maxim machine guns. The army report said it was destroyed by artillery fire in the summer of 1916. Also, at least one Mavak Type 377 series armored locomotive was captured by the Romanian army, and they used it until I think 1940. Using them on these different fronts shows that they tried to use the special strengths of armored trains in different fighting situations, from the wide plains of the east to the mountain battlefields of Italy. While we don't have detailed or many detailed battle records for every single train, some information gives us an idea of their service. Panzerzug 1 was the first standard Mavak built train, and it was sent into battle almost as soon as it arrived to the front line in December 1914. This marked the official start of these machines in the Austro-Hungarian service. Panzerzug 7 and Panzerzug 8, these were examples of heavy trains. A photo from Zborov in 1916 shows them with a 7cm kick-firing gun car at each end, two locomotives in the middle and an MG car, which is an infantry wagon, also in the middle. Talking about how well they worked, Austro-Hungarian armored trains were seen as useful when used in special tactical conditions. But there were also complaints. Some thought their weapons were too light to be decisive in attacks. So they were often not used at the very front of a large-scale attack, but they were very good in defense, and as said many times, in covering retreats. On the Eastern Front, the ability to act as a mobile shock force was a huge plus. However, they didn't fight very often. For example, Panzerzug 7 is said to have fought only 10 days in a 7 month period. This might be because the missions were very specific, or because it was hard to keep such a big machines running, or maybe the commanders didn't want to risk these valuable trains too much. The Austro-Hungarian command knew that the trains could be stopped by damaged trucks or hit by concentrated artillery fire, so they probably preferred to use them for jobs where their strength were most useful and the risks were lower, like giving mobile artillery support from safer places or acting as a strong rearguard. The way these moving forts looked might have also had an impact on an enemy, as they were quite huge and scary, which could have been another reason to use them, even if the power of attack was sometimes limited by their weapons or how they were used or utilized. The Austro-Hungarian Empire's use of armored trains in World War I, even though they started later than some other countries, led to a good number of Panzerzüge. These iron giants played special and important roles. They were especially good at providing mobile firepower, scouting, and giving key support during retreats on the huge Eastern Front and the difficult and often stuck Italian front. How they were developed and used shows a common wartime thing. Taking a technology they already had and changing it to meet the needs of a giant industrial war. The story of these trains is like a story of Austria-Hungary in the war itself. They weren't quite ready with some kinds of technology at first, then they quickly changed because of what was happening on the battlefield. They relied on the Empire's factories like the Mavak works and faced the challenge of using their resources on many tough fronts. But armored trains didn't stay important forever. The same things that made them good in some situations, being tied to a railway track for moving and shooting, also made them easy to attack. As World War I went on and new ways of fighting and new technologies came about between the wars and in World War II, the weaknesses of armor trains became clearer. Tanks got better and could go almost anywhere. Airplanes became better at attacking ground targets and big trains were very easy to hit. Also, artillery got more precise and they got stronger. All these made these railway giants less powerful on the battlefield. The fact that their trucks could be easily sabotaged was always a major weak spot. Even though the armored trains eventually became less important, they have an important place in military history. They show the smart thinking and ability to make do with what they had during a time of huge changes of technology. They show smart thinking and ability to make do with what they had during a time of huge changes in technology and terrible fighting. Maybe they were a weapon system that was between old ideas of railway fighting of the 1800s and the machine-based fighting of the 1900s. But the KUK Panzerzüge were a unique and strong way of show of military power on rails, leaving a clear memory from a past time of war.